Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Hello, survivors. This is Annie Allen. Welcome back to the Starting Over Stronger Divorce Survival and Recovery show. Today, we are going to be talking about one of the two sure things in life, not death, but taxes. How taxes are affected or could be affected during your divorce. And I'm excited to have Dana Arth on the show today. Dana is a CPA with a busy accounting practice in Lee Summit, Missouri. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself here in a moment. Dana and I first met in 2018 through one of my favorite mortgage loan officers, Mike Brown with Alpha Mortgage. And yes, we do have favorites as real estate agents, the ones who make our lives easier by taking the time to educate our clients and make things happen for them. And I have learned a lot about accounting and taxes from Dana. So I invited her here today because I know she has a lot to share with you about this area of concern that many of you ladies have as you face a divorce. So welcome, Dana, to the show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Annie.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have owned my own business for, since 2009, and I started it, I'm going to say just kind of naively. I started in my home with a handful of clients, and eventually that grew, and here we are. I have employees that work for me full-time, and we have several clients, both tax and accounting, and I have enjoyed it. It's helped provide for my children, of course. And I guess I should say maybe the most important thing about me is that I'm a mom of 4 children. Their ages range from 23 to 13, so they keep me pretty busy. And I have enjoyed, I will say this. I have enjoyed being a mom. I've enjoyed being a business owner, but it can be a hard act to juggle as women. We struggle with that sometimes, but
well, great. I appreciate you sharing that. And, I want to ask you a specific question that I ask all of my guests, which is, how has divorce affected your life? If you don't mind sharing how much or how little as you want of your story.
Oh, yeah. I was married 24 years, and divorce, it was hard because I married at a young age and I didn't know how to be anything other than married. So I will say that and as I told you before, I had started my business and I had started right before the divorce. So I had that going, but it was in its infancy stages, and I was very fearful about taking care of my family and making sure enough income was coming in, even though I was getting child support. So I did the most rational thing anybody could do. I remarried out of fear. That didn't go so well.
It happens sometimes.
Yes. And I wouldn't recommend that, but I guess I definitely understand it. And I will say that I have been humbled by my learning experiences, and I no longer call them mistakes. No point in beating myself up.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that little bit of your personal side for us so ladies can better relate to you. And I'm certain that many of them listening today relate to exactly what you just said in many ways. So I know that we have had some conversations on this show about financial wisdom during divorce and a lot of different angles to that. But you have some thoughts on your take on that, what the financial implications are of divorce. And that's such a broad question. I don't even know really how, I guess, to narrow that down other than how you see that with, your accounting and tax clients who are facing divorce, I guess.
Okay. It is broad, and I'll give a 10,000 foot view because I know we'll drill down further into it later on. But I will say that taxes can change because of your change in marital status. That's the number one trigger right there.
Yeah.
Also, I've seen this. I've seen obviously income changes. If it can change for a woman, I say woman because most of our listeners are women, I'm going to say.
Absolutely. Yep.
If she was a stay-at-home mom, her income may go up because she started working.
True.
And so conversely, if someone is working, if one of the spouses is working and they get a divorce or both are working, I've seen them actually benefit with a lower when their income went down because you're dividing two incomes up separately at that point. And I would say that I've heard people say actually getting a divorce made me have more money because the other spouse spent more. And that's not tax related, but it definitely, the filing status is tax related, but I have seen positives even in the reduction of income. And child support is not a taxable form of income. So that really sometimes helps the person getting it, which is usually a woman. And
which unfortunately that went into play after my divorce was final. So my alimony is tax deductible or is taxable, I mean.
Yes. And I was referring just to child support.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But you bring up a good point. Alimony up until the new tax act was taxable for the recipient and a deduction for the person giving for the generous contributor. Let's put it that way.
Until January 2019, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I think it's 2018.
Okay.
I don't remember off the top of my head, actually.
Well, it would have to be 2019 because my divorce wasn't final until April 30th of 2018. And it is definitely now for me where I pay taxes on it and it's not a deduction for him. And I think that changed that next calendar year, which would be January 2019.
Yeah, so they did give people the new tax act went into effect the first of the year of 19, but that was the one thing they gave people a little time on because divorces were still in the works, probably from 18. And that's, you got stuck with that rule.
But you said child support is not, and that hasn't changed?
That has not changed. And I don't see that changing. It's very possible that the alimony rule will get changed with the new administration and the tax changes that will probably take place.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Who knows?
But all the changes, the one thing I would say is we used to call it permanent tax changes, and they're not really as permanent as they used to be because it seems to be more administrative. Whoever's in the administration, they're based upon that. So we may see some changes on that. We'll just have to keep our eyes and ears open for that.
But, our crystal ball is in the shop, so we can't really tell you at this point in time.
Exactly.
But you were probably going somewhere with that on the financial aspects of dealing with a client who's going through a divorce and what you advise them, what, kind of is the big picture outlook for them. You've tackled some of it. Is there anything else?
Divorce has a lot that goes along with it that is not even related to financial, obviously. And so when someone comes to me, I like to know their value system first and foremost, because that should drive all the other decisions. That should be, if you got that very defined in your life, if you have a good awareness of it, you are going to base decisions on that. And it really does give you moorings, I believe. And so a lot of people if they don't have the home after a divorce, I see a lot of them rent for a year. They go to an apartment, they get their bearings, and we're always told that that's not a good financial decision because you're not building equity. But maybe for that season of life, it's a really good idea, and it doesn't save on taxes, it doesn't build equity, but it gets someone in a position where they can better afford a house or what they want and where they want to land, because this is definitely not the financial aspect of it. But after a divorce, you are disoriented. You have to rediscover who you are many times. So it's a good opportunity to not put pressure on yourself, and then you can focus on rebuilding or building to begin with.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In fact, I recommend that a lot for people because it is definitely no shame in needing that time just to reset before you make any long-term decisions. You're not usually thinking very clearly, and you've had some pretty significant changes. And, maybe there's other factors in play. For me, it was that I had a son who was getting ready to graduate high school in just a few months. And I wanted to stay in the district where he could be at my new place and get to school easily. But at the same time, I knew I didn't want to stay in that area long term. So I rented until he graduated and really until I decided exactly where I wanted to be. And then like a year and a half later, I was ready and I bought a house. It happened. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think that year and a half that I lived in that townhouse, I will always really think very, very fondly of that place because it was like my little nest, my safe place that was mine and mine only. I could decorate it however I wanted. I didn't have anybody's opinion to consider. I could do whatever I wanted with it and spend my time how I wanted. And it just became a place of solace for me. And I think that can happen anywhere. And if you have the ability and you feel very clear about buying right after a divorce, then you should do that. But if for whatever reason you don't, there's certainly no shame in renting for a while.
Yes, and home maintenance on top of all the emotions you're dealing with and rediscovering who you are, in some cases, probably getting a new career, not having that to deal with there's a lot of relief in that. It can almost feel like a vacation as far as going home at night. Like you said, it's solace.
Mm-hmm. Now, thinking about taxes specifically, I know one of the things you mentioned is obviously your filing status is going to change. And how might that come into play depending on the time of year that the divorce is happening, when it's expected to be final? What are some different options that people might choose based on those different factors?
Well, I would say the filing status. So you want to know specifically about filing status with that?
Well, what I'm thinking about is, I know there's been situations with some of my divorce coaching clients where, there's different things. There's, the factor that whoever files their taxes first can basically do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. And the other person is just going to have to adapt unless they really want to go, fight that. And then there's the fact that, if they are working well together, is it better to go ahead and do one more year of filing jointly if you feel like your interests are going to be protected in that, and that if there's a refund coming, that he's going to give you half of it, or, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by Cutrera Law, helping people when bad things happen. Kansas City divorce attorney Nick Cutrera has been offering strong yet compassionate legal representation for almost 2 decades. Voted best of the bar 7 times and the coveted super lawyer 3 years running, he's earned these honors as an effective litigator who works hard to avoid litigation where fair settlements are possible. Every case is different. Cutrera Law successfully tries or settles cases where both parents gain substantial, meaningful contact with children, or which a parent's visitation is restricted based on the best interest of the kids, also increasing or decreasing child support based on present financial circumstances. Each case is litigated according to its own merit. The choice of an attorney is a personal decision that should not be made based on advertising alone. As always, Starting Over Stronger Coaching recommends interviewing a few attorneys before making your selection. If you are in the Kansas City area, I highly recommend making Nick Cutrera one of those calls. Call Cutrera Law at 816-525-5226 or visit CutreraLaw.com. That's CutreraLaw.com. Please tell them you heard about them on Starting Over Stronger. Now back to the show.
There are options. You can, if you're still married at the end of the year, you could choose to do married filing jointly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a good relationship and you don't want to file together, you might be qualified to file as head of household.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've been separated for more than 6 months or for 6 months of the year, you get to have that option of head of household. And that means you've provided half of the support, more than half of the support of the children. And that gets you a better tax, it gets you in the tax brackets in a better position. So you don't have to be officially divorced to do that. And if you're dividing dependents, the soon-to-be ex-spouse can also file head of household under certain circumstances. It's very situational, so I wouldn't tell anybody to go just do it without consulting a tax professional, but there are
Mm-hmm.
options that might be better than married filing separate, because that one, there's a lot of things that get lost in that filing status. Certain tax credits get taken away. You both have to either itemize or not itemize, so you need to know what the other person's doing. And it's the least advantageous filing status. So there's getting along can if you can. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but getting along can really pay off financially in these situations.
Yeah, for sure. If you can, as you said, that's not
Yeah.
always in your control, but it's good to know like what each of those statuses will do for you and which ones, like you said, are less advantageous and are going to actually kind of hurt you in a way that you maybe didn't realize. Those are important things to consider. Anything else on filing status or anything else specifically about taxes as someone's going through a divorce?
Well, I would say some things to keep in mind. Divorce decrees are trumped by federal law. They will not stand up to the IRS. So, for example, if the divorce decree says that the wife or the ex-wife claims one child 1 year and the husband gets it the next year,
Mm-hmm.
the child the next year, the IRS doesn't really care about that. If you have the child more days of the year, in the eyes of the IRS, you get to claim that child, and you're
Yeah.
providing the support.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that case, if there's a dispute, you will win if you can produce the log of the more days. So,
Right.
to prevent that, you can sign a release form for exemption release. They call it, or actually it's dependent release now. We don't have exemptions, but you can get that release form and
Mm-hmm.
or have it signed by the soon-to-be ex-spouse. And I suggest that if you could have that written in the divorce decree, that gets signed up front. So if someone's taking all odd years, the form can be filled out according to that, or
Mm-hmm.
all even. So that way, later on, you don't have to try to get a signature, or later on, the other ex-spouse, goes ahead and claims the dependents. Because I do see that. And like you said before, it becomes a race of
Mm-hmm.
who can do it first. And I've also seen, though, where we've tried to file the return and it was rejected because the dependent had already been claimed on another return. And so we just paper file and tell them we have a log, show the log. And I personally have not seen them not grant that. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't cases where they don't, but in some cases, they don't even go after the original filer. So I personally have not seen them even do that, but they may be trying to enforce that a little more now. But in any case, I believe that if you really have the right to that dependent and the divorce decree is in agreement with that, so that you don't have a civil matter that might have to be taken up in the court, then you should take it and not back down from that. I also, as we said before, another thing is that the filing status becomes very important in the divorce. But most importantly, I think a person should get tax advice from a professional. I've had people that were just getting ready to start the process and they wanted advice, and it just gives them some or it gives them moorings. It's very intimidating to deal with all this, and it's not fun. It usually creates a pit in somebody's stomach. So getting help on that and knowing that a person's not going to be judged for not knowing.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not going to know. And when the emotions run high, that's when we tend to do things that aren't really best for us sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope everybody's taking notes. This is good stuff and important stuff. And, like you're saying, I think it's what I see a lot of, and I bet you do too, is that in a divorce situation, women are flooded with negative emotions. It's kind of hard not to be. We're watching a dream die. We may have had to be the one to pull the plug on a brain dead marriage. And nobody gets married with divorce in mind. It's a loss, and we are in a grieving process. And at the same time, we're having to make all these really big decisions that are going to affect the rest of our lives, or certainly our immediate future in big ways. So I want to kind of just explore what ways, you see women allowing emotion to be detrimental during their divorce, and what thoughts you have on how to regulate that so that we can make better choices.
Okay. I sometimes see a woman that is angry, and understandably so. And sometimes when we get angry like that, we want to show our independence and let them know that we don't need them. And at that point, we probably are done with the thought of needing them anyway. If we felt that at one point, we get over it. But at that point, that declaration of independence, that sounded very patriotic, didn't it? That having that attitude can bite you, because you might be letting your anger or a little bit of pride get in the way of your financial health. So you decide to walk away from certain things that are still on the table, and because you don't want to deal with it, or you want to show them you don't need it and later regret it. So I say it's really important to have good, trusted advisors. You help women. You're a divorce coach, so you can, first of all, you can relate to how they feel because you've been through it. And secondly, you can, with empathy, you can help hold your client accountable and help them see where they may or may not want to go. And I think that is so important, because you need those people in your life to take the emotion out of the decision making. And so a trusted advisor, as far as your finances, tax, financial advisor, those people are very key in the process too, because they are going to direct the financial part, which can be very overwhelming. And I would say having those kind of people on your quote team is key. And I think people are embarrassed. A lot of times women are embarrassed because they don't know that, but that's how I feed my family. So I don't know what other people know. And so being afraid of getting that help can be so detrimental, because Annie, you've been through divorce and you help people through it, but there were things you probably did based on emotion. I definitely did. I shared it at the beginning, based on emotion, because I didn't turn to people to help me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a divorce coach, I'm sure it goes without saying, emotions are pretty much the number one reason my job exists. I mean, it's literally the most important reason to hire a divorce coach, because you know that your emotions are in control. And even if you don't think they are, they're probably affecting you more than you realize. And I think why divorce coaching is growing and in more demand by busy, smart, professional, and even budding professional women is because they know they need support. And they know that they don't want to go through this alone. They want to have that thinking partner and resource guide for divorce. That team that you talked about is a godsend. I mean, I have so many people in my network in so many different industries, all that work with people going through divorce, and all that are people I know, like, and trust, because every client I work with has a variety of different needs and questions. And I'm not an expert in everything, so I don't want to try to be their one source for everything. I want to be able to advocate for them and introduce them to people that are going to be able to help them with all of these different needs that they have. And, every divorced woman I've meet who learns what I do says something like, I wish I'd known you, X years ago. My reply is always like the same exact thing. Me too. And, sometimes if time allows, I even ask, what would have had to have happened if you did meet me then for you to know you needed a divorce coach? You needed to make that investment in yourself. And, I get some interesting responses. Some people, I think I definitely would have. And others, I don't know. I was so headstrong. I thought, I just needed to buckle down and figure it out. I didn't know who I could trust. I would have maybe been afraid to, reach out and get help. And I'm just so used to just doing everything myself. If you want something done right, you do it yourself, right? So there's some overwhelm that I think causes people to not make that investment in themselves. And interestingly, the emotions that we talked about being the number one reason a person needs a divorce coach is also the number one reason they don't hire one, because they're overly emotional and overwhelmed, and they just think that their attorneys, their end all be all, going to do everything for them. And sometimes that works out okay because you've got a really conscientious attorney, and other times it doesn't because they're legal professionals. They're not real estate professionals, financial professionals, tax professionals, emotional professionals. And they just don't have the time or desire to coach people through every little decision and spend, dozens of hours a week with them, and that's what you feel like you need, I think, a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
Why? I'm just curious. I always like to ask people, why do you think it's so hard for women to just stop and realize they can't do everything themselves and make that investment in getting help?
Well, I think we're used to being the nurturers. And so to turn the tables and us reach out for, I'm going to even call it nurturing because it is a form of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really natural to us. We, as moms, a lot of times we eat last. We worry about what we're going to wear last. We put everybody ahead, and then all of a sudden and that requires strength. And so all of a sudden we can't do it as well, or maybe we can't for a little while, and we're very hard on ourselves. So we don't give ourselves the grace to need help. And so, or to even take time to just the self-care aspect, just having a little time alone, or even just the things that make us feel human. That's what I call it. Make us feel actually human. We become martyrs. And we're not complaining martyrs. We martyr ourselves a lot of times because that's what we assume we have to do. And it is hard. It's in fact, we become apologetic because we reach out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
you're right. You're right.
And I think we just feel guilty. That women tend to feel guilty. It's kind of it's just what we do. And so we have to fight through that. And I think in all aspects of life, a lot of times women take on guilt that we shouldn't. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. We have dove deep into the emotional abyss of divorce. We better get out while we can.
Yeah.
And jump back into taxes. We've talked about filing status. Is there anything more on that, or is there anything that's different? We talked a little bit about filing status if the divorce isn't final yet. Maybe is there anything that we didn't cover as far as after the divorce?
Yes. You can claim head of household if you have the child, like I said, if you meet the qualification of providing the support test and then the number of days, number of nights actually. So that status is not nearly as detrimental to you as single, because then it's single. And if you do have dependents, that's you definitely want to claim the head of household, as long as you follow or fall into the requirements that are necessary for that. Well, some people don't have children, so they're going to go from married filing jointly to single. That's a jump in the tax brackets. What happens really is the tax brackets are progressive. So at lower income levels, it's a lower rate, and then it eventually builds up as the income increases. When you're married, the breadth of those tax brackets is wider. So in other words, $10,000, well, I'm going to use a higher number, $50,000 for a single person is taxed higher than for a married couple, because you get more time. I'm going to say you get more time or more of your income spent in those lower brackets than you do when you're married. So it just goes up much faster as single. So that can hurt. And as far as filing, head of household is more advantageous to married, or I keep saying married filing separate, but it's not. Single, it's not as advantageous as married filing jointly, but then you have the aspect of your income going down. So all those factors, if you can claim head of household, it's not going to be nearly the shock. So I would say that changes for sure in your marital situation.
Okay. And what about division of assets, the house, the 401k, the retirement plans? How does any of that factor into taxes?
Well, if it's a primary residence, there are requirements. You have to have the house for a certain number of years, and you have to have lived there a certain number of years. And most of the time, and there's a dollar amount limit too, but most of the time people qualify for the exemption on the sale of a primary residence. So meaning that's not taxable. So if the two of you get divorced and you're forced to sell the house because that's part of the agreement, and someone needs the money out of it and the other person doesn't want to refinance, that should not be a taxable event in most cases. But the 401k / retirement plan, that is it's very important that be run through what we call a quadro. A quadro plan needs to take place or be set up so that you don't have tax implications, because if you are entitled to your former spouse's 401k, let's say half of it, and he just writes you a check out of there, well, there's going to be tax on that. And if you're under 59 and a half, there's going to be the early withdrawal penalty of 10%. So a quadro creates the format for which that is transferred without the tax implications. And what I have found is most divorce attorneys don't do the quadros, but they should be able to tell you where to go on that. A CPA could probably tell you, but it's so important to have that set up and there's a certain time period that it can be set up even after divorce. But before any of those assets are moved around, they definitely want to be funneled through the quadro.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes for any stock accounts as well. That's, another big asset that some people are going to be dividing. I don't know if there would be anything else other than maybe if they had commercial or business ownership or rental properties or other things outside of their primary residence, then of course that might be another asset that's being divided.
Yeah, those get divided, but they're not subject to the quadro because that's specific to retirement-based assets. But brokerage accounts that get divided, like the stocks, and then you said the rental properties or businesses, and that becomes really complicated. There can be tax implications for sure. Yeah, because maybe someone is in the divorce is selling their ownership interest to the other. So
Mm-hmm.
that becomes something that I would say definitely needs to be handled with an attorney and a financial person, most likely CPA, because of the tax implications.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
almost,
maybe an investigative CPA. I forget what they call them. A forensic accountant. Is that it?
yeah, they can do that too. But
Yeah,
but
I've
just
heard of it.
understanding the tax implications of the types, if you're trying to divest from a joint business venture, just understanding what that does tax wise. It
Yeah.
still may make sense because you don't want to be in the business together. And I do tell people it's not always just about numbers. It's not about the tax. You may have real good reason to get away from that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, so you had mentioned something earlier about called it not during the show, but you and I had talked about something called innocent spouse relief.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yes, that when you file a joint tax return, you are jointly and severally liable for that tax liability. That means if one party doesn't want to pay the tax or doesn't, they can come after the other one for the full balance. They don't divide it out. So
Okay.
many times, and this would be common in a divorce situation, if there's been abuse or if one spouse has just not been honest, and I've seen it. So one spouse has a business and does not report all the income. So the other spouse, she's the stay-at-home mom maybe, or she has her own career. She's not really paying attention to that. She's trusting her spouse to be filing things appropriately, and she signs the return. Well, signing the return actually puts her on the hook for that liability. And so if an audit comes about, and I've seen this, they had an audit and then she was stuck with the tax that was assessed because he did not report the income correctly. And it was really his liability, and the divorce agreement did state that, but without filing for innocent spouse relief with the IRS and showing that the person that needs the relief has reasonable cause, and there's a bunch of requirements. It's technical, but the bottom line is, without doing that, the IRS still will have rights to go after both parties for that tax. So if someone, it actually is a good word of caution, regardless of somebody's status, married, divorced, getting married, to be very cognizant of what you sign on a tax return. Because if you have any reason to not trust what your spouse is putting on there, then I believe you're better off to do married filing separate than to be on the hook for something that might be fraudulent.
Yeah.
So, yes, and so that is an option with the IRS. They allow you to apply for innocent spouse relief.
Okay. And what about injured spouse relief? How is that different?
Injured spouse relief is what you would do if you married someone who had an existing tax liability or outstanding child support, and it would have resulted in the refund being taken. So you both file, and you're used to getting a refund, and based upon your income, the allocation of the refund between the two of you really mostly goes to you, but they snatch it because your spouse owes, and student loans are part of that too. They owe tax, or they owe student loan or child support, and if you file as injured spouse, the IRS will allocate your portion of the refund to you, and you get it. So they don't take your refund and apply it to your spouse's debt that was incurred before the marriage. And so
Okay.
sometimes that comes about as a big surprise to people.
Yeah.
That's how they find out about that prior debt. And I don't even think necessarily people think that they're hiding something. They just don't really think about it. And then the tax return gets filed, and all of a sudden it comes to light. But that can be done when the tax return is filed. You file the injured spouse relief.
Well, that is an important one to know. I appreciate you sharing that. And we've covered a lot, but one thing that we haven't really explored is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and it affects the majority of my coaching clients. And yet, I think it's kind of unbelievable that despite it happening in more homes than anyone cares to think about across this nation, it's almost always something people say they've never heard of: financial abuse.
Uh-huh.
And it's a heavy subject. It resonates deeply and heavily for those who are trying to bear up under it. And in fact, it consumes many to the point that they feel like they can never escape. And so from your perspective, I don't know how much you know about that, but what is it in your understanding, and how can it affect a woman regarding her future financially and with taxes?
Well, it's near and dear to my heart too. Not really dear, I guess, but it definitely resonates. It's almost a secret abuse. It's subtle sometimes. It's not always subtle, but people don't even realize they're being abused because they just accept it as normal. And cases of that are when a spouse conceals assets, maybe sets up a private bank account, and the other spouse doesn't know about it. Maybe they actually outright steal money. They remove the other spouse from the bank accounts, and they take control over all of the money. They sometimes might take the entire paycheck of the spouse and decide that all financial decisions will be made by them. And I will say how this can affect you tax-wise is, like I said before, a form of financial abuse would be doing things on the tax return that are not honest and making the spouse sign and giving that spouse no say-so in that. Another thing so that has obvious tax implications, but setting up credit cards in secret and racking up a bunch of debt that maybe can't even be paid off. And so after the divorce, or even prior to a divorce, maybe there's debt forgiveness, and that becomes a taxable event. So the spouse that is the victim there may not have benefited at all from that credit card issue, but they're filing jointly. And maybe this happens during the marriage. They're filing jointly the credit card, or actually, quite honestly, sometimes the credit cards are set up without somebody knowing, in their own name. And so you get a 1099 on that forgiveness of debt, and you pay tax. So those kind of things result in tax. The other things don't always result in increased tax liability, but they're obviously just a really terrible way of manipulating a person.
Yeah. And that even rises to the level of manipulation where, it doesn't go to they're stealing your paycheck, but they're creating an environment where it's impossible for you to have one. And, keeping you from accelerating in your career, where you would then become, put yourself in a position where you would have the option to end the abuse,
Right.
So
Right.
it can be very insidious and covert.
That's the word I was going to use, insidious.
Yeah. And in fact, most times it is.
Yes.
And most people would be very surprised to know, the friends and family members of the couple would be oftentimes surprised to understand the level of what goes on financially, and the fact that it is abuse. And there really is no other way to describe it when it becomes that.
Right. And it's just not talked about a lot. It's
not.
And it's maybe accepted. So and it can be under the guise of, I'm taking care of you. So, so you don't have to think about any of this. And you're right. Insidious describes it well, because it takes away a person's ability to take care of herself if she has not, like you said, advanced her career, and then a divorce happens and she's in a bad situation.
Yeah. And this is deep, and it goes, way into, more than we're going to cover today. But I will say this, the author Shannon Thomas has written a book on the subject. I don't know the exact title right off the top of my head, but it may just be that, financial abuse. But I'm sure if you Google that, Shannon Thomas, financial abuse, the book will come up. It would be an excellent resource if you happen to be someone who feels like what we just talked about resonates with you and your situation, and you want to understand what is happening and how to protect yourself. That would be a great place to start. As we come to a close on this conversation, do you have any other thoughts on taxes or finances? Any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, I think we've touched on the financial/tax aspect of it pretty well. And I would just say that I'm going to talk about the things that are more right-brained, the more feeling side of this. Number one, just don't be so hard on yourself. It is a tough time. Divorce is not an easy thing. And there are going to be questions. There are going to be the things that you remember from the past, that tape that plays with all the things you should have done, could have done. Living in those regrets will actually impede further progress. It will beat you up, and it will leave you feeling powerless. So not doing that will make the process so much better. And it's not something that is going to be a straight line. It's going to be, one day you might beat yourself up, and then the next day you remind yourself you're not doing that, and you go back and forth. But that's our life journey anyway. So doing that, and then not apologizing for needing help. It's absolutely okay to advocate. In fact, you should advocate for yourself. A lot is on the line. You may have children that you're still taking care of, and if you don't advocate for yourself and make sure that you are taking care of those things, then you are unable to take good care of your children, and you're unable to move forward. And so advocating happens by getting trusted advisors that can help you through the process. And they, of course, help take the emotion out of it. And then your friends. Friends can help with emotional support. Friends who have been through it before can just lend an ear, or ones that haven't can still be, you sometimes just need a shoulder to cry on. So having that group of people and keeping that group relatively small. Not everyone needs to know the details of such a painful thing in your life, and just knowing that you can rely on these people to help you get through it. And I know that you talk about divorcing well, Annie. It's hard to divorce, and in the past, I probably would have said that there's no way to do it well, but there is, if you rely on someone like you that can help with that. And if you are able to get people in your corner that can help you see it objectively, and remembering that the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield, and just keep moving forward, that is, well, it's not the optimal thing you had planned for when you started out getting married, because like you said, no one gets married hoping for a divorce, but you can still have a good life and move forward, and maybe, and in a lot of cases, and a lot of us would say, a life that was better. It was painful getting it started, but that new chapter created so much more opportunity for happiness and just more fulfillment.
Absolutely. That's a perfect place to end. I think that's so true. We have to learn to advocate for ourselves and know that it's not selfish, and in fact that it is being responsible, which is a good thing, and going and getting the information and resources that we need if we don't have them. That's wisdom. And certainly we learn through divorce that no one's going to do it for us. We have to learn to advocate for ourselves. So I hope this has been so good for you to hear today, listeners. If you have further questions for me or for Dana, please reach out to me at Annie@startingoverstronger.com, and I will be glad to make a personal introduction for you. If you need a divorce coach, or if you're just curious to learn more about what that is, go to startingoverstronger.com. And thank you again for joining us each week as we explore life during and after divorce and how to make the most of it all. Remember, you're not alone, or you certainly don't have to be. There are people and resources prepared and passionate about being a life preserver for you during this storm. So reach out and grab a hold of one. I'm happy to connect you with anyone on my divorce team. Join us again next week for more help as you divorce and hope as you are starting over stronger.